glass of water. Be right back.
Hair wrap.
All right.
Hey, Joey, can you mute yourself? Jen's giving us instructions in the chat.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be going live in about 1 minute, so just stay tuned. Sorry that the link I shared earlier wasn't working. There was a Zoom to YouTube connection problem. So thank you. I told everyone to turn off the YouTube in the background, and then I had it on. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Pardon our technical difficulties. I hope everyone can hear us okay, and throw it in the chat if you're having any problems hearing us. And also throw in the chat if you have questions for our panelists. And with that, we're gonna get started. Since we only have an hour and we have a lot to talk about and a lot of people to talk to. I'm Jen Sabella. I'm Director of Strategy and co-founder at Block Club Chicago. And we are so grateful to have Tanika and Maria here, who helped coordinate this whole folded map series. Also here is Dawn Rhodes, Senior Editor for Block Club Chicago. And to get started, I just want to dive right in and introduce everyone to Tanika and Maria and have them give an overview of what this project was. If you read some of the stories, you have a good sense of it, but even if you didn't read them, you should definitely tune in and just listen to what the project's about and how you can get involved in making Chicago a better place to be. Tanika, do you want to get started?
Yes, so I'm just gonna say who I am and anything specific other than that.
No, just, yeah, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the folded map project.
Okay.
And how it started.
Okay, thank you. I am Tanika Johnson. I am a social justice artist. I'm always changing the name, but at the core, I'm a photographer who's born and raised in Chicago, specifically Inglewood neighborhood. And I created the Folded Map Project, which is a multimedia project that investigates how urban segregation presents itself today and how it impacts our social networks by using Chicago's grid map to pair people together, have them introduce each other who live on the same Chicago street, but opposite ends of it in racially, economically different neighborhoods, such as like 6700 North Ashland and 6700 South Ashland. And today's Project Don't Go is an expansion, the latest expansion of Folded Map.
And Maria, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got connected with Tanika and this project?
Yeah, my name is Maria Kriesen. I'm a sociologist at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and I've studied residential segregation for a long time. And I won't bore everyone with the details, but basically through a journalist, I ended up meeting Tanika because I wrote a book on residential segregation around the same time Folded Map became an exhibit at Luma. And journalists were asking me as a researcher to say something wonky about segregation to add to their story on the amazing Folded Map project. So one thing led to another, and Tanika and I have been doing exciting work ever since. And I've been able, just really grateful that Tanika's brilliance is there and that I can find ways to connect and augment it.
Awesome. And so we wrote a lot and we heard a lot about Tanika in 2017 and when the projects first got off the ground and you were connecting people from the north side and the south side and having them explore each other's lives. What made you take on this project and these stories that specifically focus on misconceptions about neighborhoods and kind of like the whole don't go there thing? I know all of us who are from Chicago have heard this our whole lives. I'm from the South Side, so everyone's always like, you're from the South Side? Like, isn't it scary? How are you not murdered? And it's really annoying. So can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be?
Yes. So as I was starting to do well, first, before I even get into that, let me just say that me having been able to connect with all of you all, and especially Maria, to partner to do this project is one of the beautiful things that can occur when you are able to connect with someone that you share a passion with. And, I just think about the fact that our city, the way it currently is, would have prevented Maria and I from connecting. But luckily, our passions allowed us to be able to disrupt segregation and connect through this project. And so us connecting enabled us to be able to create this extension of Folded Map. So I just want people to know that this right here is a testament of what can happen when people break down systemic walls and build a relationship. And so it's primarily me recognizing how diversity and me moving beyond where I was told I didn't belong or wasn't welcomed to connect with people really influenced my passion to create pathways for others to do it. And when I started doing a lot of Folded Map presentations, it was one presentation in particular that struck me because honestly, I hadn't heard a lot of the advice to not go to the South and West Side, primarily because I'm moving in a lot of predominantly Black spaces. That's just not what we say to each other. And my friends who are non-Black, obviously we built friendships and those conversations never came up. So I never consistently ran into this advice until I started, just asking people during a lot of my Folded Map presentations. And every time, everyone's hand would go up. And specifically one time in September of 2019, I was hosting a presentation for a group of predominantly white, all transplants to Chicago who were freshmen at Northwestern. And I just asked them this question, and all of them in their little 18, 19-year-old face, all of them just honestly raised their hand when I asked the question, as you've been prepared, getting ready for college and to come to Chicago, how many of you all have been told where to not go? Have you all been told to not go to the South Side? And all of them said yes. And I don't know, just for some reason, it just broke my heart because this was, quite frankly, the youngest group I had asked that question to. And I was just thinking, wow, I know what they're being told to avoid, the opportunities of relationships and experiences that they're not being allowed to experience because of this advice, but they don't know that yet. They're just literally taking their parents or family members' advice and they're going to stick with it for as long as possible until they know otherwise. And I just thought, oh my gosh, they're really getting set up to participate in segregation that can ultimately lead to, racist stereotypical thoughts. And I just felt like I was frustrated. And luckily by that time, Maria and I was already, playing together, thinking of projects. And I told her that, I wanted to do a solicitation to get people's stories, because this is a flip side of the conversation that's important. It's definitely important to hear from people who are from neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested and discriminated against. But I was particularly interested in the other side, how people come to avoid certain neighborhoods. What are they told? What do they struggle with trying to figure out if they should take that risk? And I thought, at the end of the day, honesty is the most important, and you can't solve an issue that you don't discuss. And this was important perspective to include if we truly want to understand the impact of this issue and the psychology and how it really does affect our social networks.
Thank you so much. And Maria, I wanted to ask you, what's Nika saying about those young people saying that about the South Side? This is something I've noticed too, that I feel like it's gotten worse recently. And I don't know if this is like a talking point thing with some like national media outlets, but do you think that the Chicago is so violent, Chicago, don't go to the South Side, do you think that that has been going on for like a really long time? I mean, Chicago's obviously been segregated for a really long time. Or do you think that cable news and just our political climate has made it a lot worse?
Boy, I am not the right person to ask that. I think, since I got here 20 years ago, I certainly think, when I first moved here, I remember going, oh, wow, the North Side, South Side thing is real. Like people talk about, I'm from the North Side, I'm from the South Side. But I think it's been going on a long time. I think with social media, with the kind of media outlets that you're talking about, it gets amplified and perhaps, it's in the ether a lot more. And people are maybe exposed to it more, but I think that the perceptions have been probably there for a long time.
And what is the most surprising thing that both of you heard in these interviews? Is there something about your own neighborhoods that you heard that you were surprised about? I know, like, when my wife and I moved back to the South Side after living north for 17 years, and a lot of people were really surprised, and they were like, what? Like, why? And then they came here and they were like, wow, this neighborhood is really beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, it really is. So those moments of surprise, is there any that stand out to you?
Oh, wow. I would say most consistently during the interviews, and I might tear up, excuse me, but people's sincerity, and honesty to be transparently, openly struggling with sharing this story that seems like, oh, it's just, so what? Somebody told you where not to go, but how it really does impact us personally, feeling made to feel less than, or made to feel like you are participating in racism, just struggling with real issues. And I was just most surprised by people wanting to share their story to kind of elevate this into the larger public conversation. The 30 people that we interviewed and the amazing ones here with us today are just a small portion of the many people who answered the solicitation. It was over 75 people that responded. And so I was just like, wow, this is what we don't see a lot of. And I think that's also part of this horrible perception of Chicago and Chicago South and West Side is we have so many amazing Chicagoans that disrupt segregation all the time in their personal lives, but we don't hear those stories. We don't hear the many movements of people in their small social circles, or the solidarity between certain groups to, make social change. We don't hear those stories as much as we hear about our violence and segregation. And, I was most impressed by being reminded of how many people in Chicago care when most of us are taught to believe that we don't.
So Jen, I'll just jump in on this. I think that's what you were hoping for. Just to say, and the people that we talked to during the interviews, Tonika and I did these interviews together on Zoom, much like we're doing right now. And Tonika, I'll just say, as usual, we have twin brains. So you stole the things I was going to say about what was surprising to me. But I guess maybe two things that just to amplify that. I think what was really striking to me was the role of people were learning these lessons from childhood. These were intergenerational transmissions by their family, by grandmothers. Grandmothers played an important role that reflects kind of generational change. And, childhood, that's a lot to start to unpack. And on top of childhood, of course, as adults, it spanned so many different kinds of people that are sending this message. It's police officers, it's university personnel, it's security guards, it's students, it's really coworkers, it's everywhere that this message is getting sent. And the second surprise is really just what Tonika was saying, was the many individual people, 5 of you are here right now, and many others who are, pushing back against this advice and pushing back against the narrative, some by becoming advocates for their community, the communities that other people are being told not to go to, and then others who are pushing it back against that advice that they're getting not to go somewhere and going there anyway. And I just think it's like Tonika said, it's individual examples of disrupting the cycle of segregation. Segregation is a huge challenge in terms of the inequities that it perpetuates, and it feels like a really, really big problem that individuals can't address. But I think what's empowering about the stories that we uncovered was that it was individual people making individual choices to disrupt it, that, if we get enough people all doing that, it can build into meaningful change.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. So with that, I am really delighted. I'd love to bring in all of our panelists. These are the people behind these, fantastic stories that you guys may have been reading on our site over the last week. So I'm going to start with a question for all of you and kick it to each of you and ask you guys to introduce yourselves to the audience and just very basically tell us a little bit about why you wanted to participate in this project. So Joey, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Mic on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there was.
Tell us your name first.
Oh, sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
Joey. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm really bad at this with a lot of people. No, so I'm Joey Delavecchia. I'm a piano technician in Chicago, and I met Tonika through Facebook. It was actually a post that I commented on. And she's like, please message me. I want to talk to you. And basically, we had one mutual friend in common, and she posted something about how the South Side was being, just demonized and everything. And I just commented saying, I'm a white contractor that services all over these areas, and it's like, this is what I do. I don't know what the problem is. I never had any problems. It's like this narrative needs to come to an end. And it was about scary places and things and all that. So I made a comment about that. She told me to reach out to her. I did. And she explained what her project was. And I thought it was phenomenal. And I wanted to be a part of it. And here I am today. We've done some Zoom videos, and, I'm happy to be here. So that's why I'm here today. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Leslie, why don't we start with you? Why don't we go to you next? Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you wanted to be a part of this.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Cortez. I go by Shive, and I learned about the Folded Map project through the Obama Foundation. I'm an alum of the Community Leadership Corps program, and I remember seeing the map on the wall and Tonika talking about what it meant to go from the South Side all the way up to, I believe it was Whitney Young, or maybe Lane Tech. I'm sorry.
Lane Tech, not our rivals.
Not the slander. I'm bringing up some slander right now, but Lane Tech, and it was something that really resonated with me as someone who traveled back and forth from Cicero to Chicago, watching the neighborhoods transform. And it was intentional, right? It's historically excluding like huge groups of people. I felt connected to this project, and I remember trying to see where I can put my little pin, and I couldn't, because I came from different areas and people thought different things of the different areas I came from. And I remember telling Tonika, and she's like, hold on to that, like, we're gonna get back to it. And that's how I came to learn about the project and ultimately like want to contribute to it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Adrienne, why don't we go to you next?
It's good. Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Hawthorne. I heard about the project actually through Folded Map email list. I had been following Folded Map for a couple of years and was very impressed by Tonika's work. And I remember reading the solicitation to, have you ever been told not to go to the South Side? And it really struck me because I have only been told not to go to the South Side. And I realized how huge of a problem that is in and of itself, and how I wanted to share my story in hopes that other people in my social circles might do the same or be empowered to change, I guess.
Great, thank you. Soren, why don't we go to you next?
Hi, my name is Soren Spicknall. I live in Kenwood right now, moving to Pullman pretty soon. I went to the Illinois Institute of Technology for undergrad, and I felt very strongly that students at my alma mater had been misled for decades and are still being misled by people in positions of trust at the university. And that my specific experience with that was motivating for joining this project. I had learned a lot in my own process of getting to know more about the city, including how my early modes of engagement with the South Side had been extractive and self-congratulatory in ways that I wanted to help others avoid. I knew Tanika through some shared personal and professional circles, so when she posted about this project, I immediately wanted to jump on board.
Fabulous. And Tiana, let's hear from you.
Hi, Tiana Morgan. Me and Tanika are both from Inglewood, but I did not know Tanika, but I had been following her Folded Map project for a couple of years. And I saw her post the story when she was at DePaul Northwestern, and she asked a group of young people there that was just starting college, what was their experience and had they been told where not to go. And it just drummed up something that I had completely forgot about. I completely forgot about that experience, kind of, just let it pass. And seeing her talk about it, drummed up my experience that I also had at IIT during orientation week. On the first day of school. So for that, I had to share my story, and it was interesting of the similarities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So let me go and direct some questions to each of you individually. Joey, why don't we start with you? So you're originally from Pittsburgh, excuse me, from Pittsburgh. So can you talk a little bit about what, I'm not terribly familiar with the city, but can you talk a little bit about what is it like there? And have you experienced segregation, anything similar to what we know about in Chicago?
I would have to say not even really remotely close to Chicago. And I'll tell you why. I was born in downtown, but I was raised in the suburbs about 12 miles south of downtown. Okay. My job was going to and from work in mainly white-owned businesses. So it wasn't like here being an on-site contractor all over the city. The only time I would experience some visual segregation would be when I took my van in for repairs at the auto shop. I went to a white-owned business in a predominantly Black neighborhood. And that was really it. It was just, I thought nothing of it. I didn't dive into segregation. I didn't dive into the whole meaning of it's not that I didn't care about people's lives or anything like that, but I was just living in my own little bubble. And I didn't read a lot about that stuff at that time. I didn't get really involved in that until I moved to Chicago in 2006.
Gotcha. Soren, I'm going to come to you next because I have a similar question for you, because you grew up outside of Chicago as well, and you grew up in several places around the state. So, but one thing that really struck me about your story when you were talking about growing up in Michigan, that even when you were a little kid, you'd already absorbed this message that Detroit was unsafe. And so can you talk a little bit more about kind of where were you kind of getting those messages? And I think you had mentioned something about seeing the evening news and stuff like that and having that on in the background.
Yeah. So I was raised in a household that by speech and by patterns of educating me, my parents very much valued teaching me about others' experiences, but there were specific conditions of where we lived that were very segregated and reproduced patterns of limited exposure to others. I grew up in between Ann Arbor and Detroit, Michigan, and then later in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and then Mobile, Alabama. But in all of those places, my family had chosen to settle in suburbs that were based on things like school quality, quality of life metrics that fell into patterns of segregation that were reproduced by economic conditions and by long-term conditions of racism. And some residents in those places self-selected for those same criteria that my parents did about quality of life, good schools, and so on. But it also attracted residents who self-selected to live where they did for avoiding people unlike them. So I would absorb things through friends' parents, through local suburban-centric news that repeated police narratives verbatim, through shallow renditions of neighborhoods told through like white-dominated popular culture. And it was often hard to tell where somebody's convictions came from in such an overwhelmingly white environment as the towns that I grew up in. Whereas where I live now, you can kind of tell, like if you see somebody who has a highly racially isolated friend group in Pullman, the neighborhood that I'm moving to, that's a third white, a third Black, a third Latino, you can kind of get the idea that their experiences may be limited. But where I grew up, you couldn't do that. And I absorbed a lot of things passively at that young age.
Thank you so much. That's really fascinating. Leslie, I want to come to you next because you mentioned something in your story that I think Northsiders might find really surprising, that when you were growing up, we're very used to this kind of framing about like, don't go to the South Side, don't go to the West Side. But when you were growing up, you heard the same things about the North Side and downtown, which I don't think a lot of Northsiders would expect. And certainly some conversations that you had with classmates took them by surprise. So can you elaborate a little bit about where those messages came from for you?
Yeah, definitely. It was mainly about, being downtown when it's empty, or even when it was busy, because we are like a medium big size city. People can run in and out. And so the idea was that because it was a big community, like that's the way in which crime happened, according to my family. And some of the things that we heard were more personal stories about things that were going on the North Side, where it was like, don't take the red line going up north, or like, especially if you're a femme, especially if you're a woman, a young girl, like don't do that. And it was more so around, like personal accounts of things happening to people and it not being covered on the news.
Great. Tatiana, let me come to you. So one of the things that struck me, Jen mentioned this, but one of the things that struck me so much about your story was that the first time you had really heard that is when you went to IIT, and then this is about your community. So what a jarring experience to have. But what do you say to people who have negative things to say about the South Side or about Inglewood more specifically?
Yeah, so it is very interesting because of course, when I was younger, I knew that things were happening, in the different communities. Things were happening, in my teenage year. I grew up in the 90s. And, but to categorize a whole group of people, like the South Side is huge. So to, go all the way from, Kenwood, Bronzeville, all the way South Shore, back to the East Side, down Morgan Park, Beverly, all the way back around Auburn, Gresham, Inglewood, everything in the middle, and to categorize a full, group of people who are mainly Black and brown, that was what was very jarring to me. Like, how can you tell people, and the school is in the community, so you're in the community, but you're telling people not to leave. And for me, I was just very surprised because I had not heard that type of narrative. Like, it was certain places that you may not go, but not necessarily don't go over the entire South Side. And for me, it's just been, this is like anytime you meet someone new that is not from here, and that is mainly not Black or brown, you have this conversation. This conversation is had. Once you say you are from the South Side, this is the conversation that you're going to have. Are you safe? How did you make it? Wow, kind of like you're that special person that made it out. And I have so many friends. My husband is from Inglewood as well. So I'm like, I have so many friends that have done great things with their lives. And they are from Inglewood or other communities like it. And they're, it's just a group of people that's everyone's trying to live, everyone's trying to make it, everyone's trying to win. And it has nothing to do with we have the same dreams and goals, that these other side have.
Wonderful, thank you. Adrienne, you had such a really powerful story about driving and going to the wrong part of the South Side, and your cousin had had a similar experience, and being scolded by your family, like, you can't do that. So can you talk a little bit about just, do you remember back, because clearly that message was already there by the time you were driving and you were 17, but do you remember where you first started, when you first started hearing that, and like when your family first started drilling that into you?
Oh man, it was early. Like, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and we would visit my grandma in Beverly. I remember being so young and driving, taking I-90 through the loop, then going all the way down, to Beverly, and just knowing like we were never going to get off at those exits south of the city. Like, we never did. We just drove to my grandma's and drove back, or we would explore little parts of Beverly, and that was that. And once I was 17 and I had a car, it was even more like, make sure, you get off at the right exit. Don't get off on the South Side. Something could happen. But yeah, I mean, I remember that as early as like 6 or 7, knowing, maybe not like, I don't remember being explicitly told that young, but I remember knowing that I wasn't supposed to go to the South Side at all.
Yeah, and that's so fascinating, because a lot of you have said that there's not a specific, you don't remember, specifically being told, but that message was implicit. It was understood by the time you got to a certain age, and that's how you functioned. I want to talk a little bit, I want to ask all of you about, now that you have confronted, these attitudes, whether they're about, communities that you grew up in or communities that you know really well or not. I want to ask you a little bit about kind of what the process has been like in having these different having conversations with your friends or with people who may still think this way. So Soren, I want to come to you first, because I really loved how in your story you talked about this racialized shorthand about places that people have never seen or experienced, and that it really does take someone who knows better to kind of counter those perceptions. So you mentioned you're a Southsider now, so do you kind of feel a responsibility to be one of those people that interrupts those ways of thinking when you're having conversations with people?
Absolutely. But I think that guiding people through that looks really, really different based on where they're starting. For some, it's just enough to be told in clear terms by somebody they trust that the things they've heard are broad brush generalizations about a huge swath of the city, literally hundreds of square miles, that has an extremely wide range of conditions and people within it. But some people are starting from such an uninformed place that the only way to get them to listen is to ease them in through narratives that are themselves harmful in some ways, which is a hard line to walk, and one that can set people up to never evolve from if they're not guided further, i.e. like when people focus on places like Hyde Park or Beverly or Bridgeport as counterexamples or examples of quote unquote safe areas. And people who are given that advice sometimes never move on to eventually understanding through experience that safety isn't at the level of neighborhoods with tens of thousands of people. Like, even that is too broad, too general. It's much more local, much more block by block once you've had that experience, or once you're with somebody who trusts you to give that experience. It's also incredibly important to make space for others to lead the conversation. I can have personal conversations with those who trust me, but I shouldn't be the only person they ever talk to about the South Side. there are histories long before me and complexities far beyond my knowledge that are held by those who've been here much longer, who are involved in their neighborhoods in different ways than I am. And I don't think that I should ever be a single resource for somebody.
That's a wonderful point. I love that. Joey, I want to ask you about that as well. So, because you mentioned in your story, having conversations with loved ones and, trying to challenge their misconceptions about Chicago. So I'm curious, has anyone, any of these people that you've spoken to, have they kind of come to visit and been surprised by what they've seen? Or have have you been able to effort these kind of conversations and being like, it's not exactly what you're thinking?
I get mixed reactions. My family's Italian. There's hundreds of us. So I go through hell sometimes because it's just like, there's so many of us. But I get mixed reactions. So if I just say, no, it's not what it's like on the news, some people might just shake their head and be like, yeah, I believe you. Sure. I mean, you live out there, so you would know firsthand with doing what you do, working in the places that you work and everything. Yeah, so there's that. And then there's like, oh, but I worry about you. But you don't understand. I worry about you. And, it's like, what are you worried about? Because some of the hard points getting across to some of them is, the fact that white people are in fact safer in Black and brown communities than those that live there. This is a fact that cannot be disputed, and I would be willing to debate anyone on the subject. It's like, we're not targets generally. I'm not saying nothing can happen to anyone at any given place, but why is it always exclusive to Chicago that something can happen to you or any major city? When I was in high school, there was drugs everywhere. There was crime in the suburbs. There was stuff. People had their, possessions stolen. They had their lawnmowers stolen in the suburbs. That was like a thing. There was theft. There was crime, murder here and there. And it was the same thing. And it's like, but when it comes to the big city, oh, it's a big deal. So I have to, give these, I have to analyze, I have to give these comparisons to them to try to make them understand. But in most cases, it's been positive, and they really enjoyed the article I shared about my Inglewood story in Tiana and Tonika's neighborhood. So, I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. And Adrienne, since, like I was saying, so much of this messaging came from your own family, I'm so curious to know, like, especially over the last couple of years, have you been able to broach these kinds of conversations with, some of this, I'm assuming maybe some of the same people who taught you not to go to the South Side?
Yeah, not with everyone, but last summer I was going to the South Side a lot more and doing some volunteering, etc. And I actually did tell my grandma about it. And she's, always very worried about me anyway, at any point, suburbs, Chicago, it doesn't matter. And I knew I was going to tell her, and I was really anxious. I remember telling Tonika and Maria, like, let's see how she reacts. Cause I think if I was younger, she may have been really worried, but I did tell her, and she was surprisingly positive. She thought it was great. She didn't seem worried or concerned. I don't know if maybe it's because I'm older now. Maybe she doesn't care as much, or maybe she's going through her own internal shift as well in the last year or so. So that really, really surprised me. And my parents also, I told them what I was doing. My dad, I think he was proud of me, but also, was like, okay, well, be safe. Like what Joey said, there's still that, even some of my close friends were like, okay, but be safe. It's like, okay, same thing. There's still, there's crime in the suburbs too. And I don't know. So I guess what I'm trying to say is my parents and my grandma surprisingly were really, really supportive. And I don't think I expected the support like that.
Thank you so much. Tiana, Leslie, you both went after Leslie's story posted today. You guys really bonded over some of the shared experiences there and about, particularly being from these parts of the city that so many people stigmatize and kind of what that means for you as individuals. So I'd really love for both of you to kind of share your thoughts about, why it's so important to dismantle these stigmas, because we're not just talking about places and communities, we're talking about people. And you both have been so open about how that affects you. So Leslie, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, I can share that, segregation, systems of oppression, they come to life in our everyday interactions and beyond. And when we unpack and continually unlearn, it can radically just make a new decision for our lives and for other people and how we treat others, as neighbors, as patients, as students. And so unpacking these stigmas is incredibly important. And it was probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned while I was at Concordia University. It was that this work needed to be done with urgency, with intention, but also having these conversations and cutting through it and not just letting it not allowing yourself to sigh, just really going into that conversation and saying where did you get that information? And how did you learn about that? And you should come over, you should come to Cicero, you should come over here and we can talk about those things, because if not, it can mean a drastic decision for somebody else somewhere else.
Tiana, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, one thing from Leslie's story, when I was reading it, she talked about imposter syndrome. And I'm like, yes, because you have to think, when I went to IIT, that was my first time in a multicultural space. I grew up in a Black neighborhood. I went to a Black elementary school, went to an all Black high school. And then I got to IIT where I was the minority. So that was really my first space as being that much of a minority, 5%, of African American students at IIT. So having, coming in and then hearing the narrative about what people think about you and where you're from, it just puts this weight on you that makes you really, really feel like I'm not supposed to be here. How did I make it here? Everybody's wondering, how did I make it here? So how am I here? And it really took a very good village from my family and, friends at school to make sure that we made it out, because it was a lot of people that did not, they end up dropping out. And for me, it was I have to, but I had a mentor later on in my college career. And that's why I try to mentor as well when I try to talk to students that are like me. And definitely, I think it's good to have that representation. I'm in engineering. It's not that many female Black engineers or people of color in engineering. So being able to talk about your struggles, talk about, where you're from and, kind of how you made it, and being that representation for someone else is why I continue to have those conversations, even in my personal career. And then just with having the conversation, even at work, so these are people that is not necessarily Black, but I like to tell them about, where I'm from in my community. And I'm always like, hey, let's go grab coffee. Let's go eat. We can go to these different neighborhoods so that you can learn. Thanksgiving is my my holiday, so I'm always inviting people to my house for Thanksgiving. I do all the cooking. And I didn't even realize until thinking about, I brought family home from IIT, for Thanksgiving that couldn't go back home because most of them lived in another country. But bringing them home with me. And then for the last, 10 or 11 years, I host Thanksgiving at my house. And that's my thing. And I'm always inviting new people over. So I'm trying to, bring in that narrative, or get rid of the narrative by experience, not just by me telling people, you know, how it is.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Jen, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Thank you guys. This is amazing, and your stories are so great, and it's making me really happy. And it's everyone in the chat, thank you for being so nice and supportive. And it sounds like we're going to have to do a South Side event soon where we kind of do a little bit of a tour, maybe like a folded map guide to the South Side. Look at me planning the next event, Nika and Maria. Maybe we'll take a little rest first. One question I definitely wanted to bring up, and this happened yesterday, and I think it's interesting, is the media's role in all of this. And this came up in the chat as well, is media perceptions of these neighborhoods, how it's covered, how these communities are covered in TV news. And this is where a lot of people get their information. So what Leslie said about her parents saying, oh, avoid the red line. I heard the same thing, like coming from the South Side, because my mom would hear there was a stabbing on the red line, or there was a mugging downtown. So obviously all of these places are scary and bad. What is something the media can do better to cover neighborhoods, and what is something that absolutely grinds your gears, just infuriates you when you see it on the news or read it in the papers or online, but not on Block Club?
Right. No, it's very important to distinguish you all and other nonprofit local news outlets than the other larger ones. And, you know, by me having gone to school for journalism specifically, that was my major at Columbia College. And I chose that school because it had so many great active reporters also teaching there, and it just had amazing resources. So when you go to a school that is known for a specific thing, you take what they say to heart. And I was told, I was going to Columbia College in the late 90s, you often hear, if it bleeds, it leads. This is something that they teach you. And they teach you that because you have to understand it is still a business. Just like a magazine is an outlet that shares information, but then there's the publishing side, which that is the business side. They have a bottom line they have to meet. They have to have increased viewership or readership so that they can sell ad space, so that they can fund the operation. And so I don't think a lot of people understand that aspect of the media, specifically the news. They don't understand that, you know, it will be a bit sensationalized in what it selects to share with you, because it has to get ratings. I mean, 10 o'clock news, like, come on, that's every channel, like they're fighting for viewership. So, you know, it's really hurtful for me, having been someone who went to journalism school, seeing how the power of the media is negatively impacting how people perceive individuals and neighborhoods. And, you know, the beauty of public journalism is so that it can be hyper local and help people understand issues that they might not necessarily have been either exposed to or not understand how it directly impacts them. And that's the strength and beauty behind journalists, you know, but institutions or media outlets like Block Club Chicago, City Bureau, Chicago Reporter, who don't have to rely on necessarily viewership for funding the actual operation, you know, people don't understand how much more quality and substantial that information is. And I just hate that people can't just learn how to question, why do you think you're hearing these crime stories? It's not because they're happening, it's something else, you know, and I just hate it so much when you only hear crime from a certain neighborhood. Not saying that, okay, it should be equal opportunity, we hear crime in every neighborhood, but you know, I want people to question, like, why do you think you hear this from these few neighborhoods only? What do you think that is? You know, I want people to question what it is they don't think they hear a lot of, and really understand that, you know, it's the media, you know, it's not, and it should not be your sole place for information, just like Soren said about even individuals. One person shouldn't be your singular source of information. And it just really hurts me that people, you know, haven't been taught how to distinguish, you know, what is useful information, and how the media plays a role in just, you know, sensationalizing a lot of issues that don't deserve it as much. Even police officers in Inglewood, the neighborhood that's, you know, the poster child for everything bad, even the police here will tell you, oh no, it's just a small percentage of people, crime involved people, that's making the entirety of the neighborhood seem bad. But even they know, no, it's not. They will tell you majority of the residents are amazing, just hardworking. They know that small population is what gets broadcasted on the news. And, you know, just how we report on crime is just problematic to me, because it's not to solve anything. It's not to educate anybody. It's literally just a ticker tape. And it's just like, what is that for? Like, why? Sorry, my little...
No, it's something we've talked about as a newsroom a lot, and we've absolutely like changed the way we covered crime, because we've, you know, the newsroom I was in before this, we covered a lot of crime, a lot of it, and readers did want to know about the crime in their neighborhoods. But there's something that's helpful. There's nothing really helpful when you're just giving a police narrative without any questioning, without any further exploration of why this is happening, or what the community is doing to combat it, or what the community needs from the city to make things better. So yeah, it's something that we're not perfect either. And I got the same, it leads speech, and crime stories always go up #1 on traffic, and that you're spot on that. So it's just something that we all need to be more aware of. And I'm glad we're having that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing that we try really hard to combat, and again, we're not perfect, we're all, you know, working on this, and we're working on, you know, trying to refine the way that we do this. But the other thing that we work really hard to combat is this narrative that people on the South and West Side don't care about crime in their communities. So like, that's another thing that we get constantly, and we're constantly writing about all these, you know, all these wonderfully engaged neighbors who absolutely do care about the safety of their communities, and absolutely do rally and march and organize and do wonderful things to support their communities too. And so we're constantly responding to trolls who are like, you know, well, where are the marches on the South Side? Well, they're there, you're just not going to them. Or you know, maybe they're not leading the news, or they're not leading broadcast news, but they're,
or maybe your social networks, because of all of this,
there it is,
wide enough for you to even know all of what's going on.
Come on now, come on.
I know Maria gonna add to that, my twin brain.
I would like, so we have about 8 minutes left, and I want to respect
Maria
everybody's time. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Maria.
I want to jump in on one thing, because I think
Sure.
For sure, the media that we have in our minds right now is the newspaper and the television, and hard stop on everything that everybody said about the role of the media and the importance of pushing back. But I also just kind of want to throw out there, we talk about this in my book on the cycle of segregation, that the media is much broader even than that, right? It is, people use the media, they use the media for where stores are advertised. They make assumptions about what's in a community based on the stores that are advertised, or the jobs that are advertised in those communities. And the big one in the room, social media, right? I mean, neighborhood listservs perpetuate perceptions about communities just hugely. So I guess I would just sort of say, we often talk about, Tonika and I, what can individual people do? Well, you know, individuals may have a harder time shifting what the big media does and how they report. You can figure out ways to try to do that, but also social media, you as an individual can intervene when you see these kinds of things on social media. You can interrupt, you can disrupt and say, well, no, hold on, it's not like that, when you see those kinds of things out there.
Yeah, and just to add on to what you were saying, Maria, that, you know, I think the work of Folded Map and all of us, you know, I want to help remind people that there is power in, you know, individually just reflecting on how you started to have certain beliefs, or even challenging what you've been taught to believe. And also, you know, just doing the work of having conversations and doing stuff like what Tiana is doing, like those things matter. And if, that creates movements, and movements, even systemic racism was a movement. It started with individuals and people. And, if protesting isn't your thing, changing how you think and talking to people, that can be your form of protest. And that's perfectly fine. And that's actually what's needed. So I just really, just wanted to share that taking those steps in your individual lives is just as powerful as anything else as well.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Thanks so much for adding that. We have about 6 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we're staying within our time. I have to say that the chat that you all are having on YouTube is absolutely amazing. Like, you guys are really, really fantastic. There's one thing that came up that I would love for our panelists to weigh in on, and this was one question about being from single white female living on the north side. I'd like to explore and get more familiar with areas on the south side, and I don't know how to plan a CTA trip and where to go. I'm going to expand that question to west side as well, since we're talking about,
yes,
we're talking about both the south and the west side here. But I would love for all of our, because even in our Zoom chat, I can see all these amazing suggestions. So real quick, where would you tell this person to start? So Leslie, why don't you start?
Definitely planning a trip to the beach. Like 35th Street Beach is so beautiful, and there's live music, and it's just so gorgeous. I think that doing that trip is really easy and accessible, so I would definitely recommend that. And then going to the west side, if you are also a bike rider, or if you can bike ride, bringing your bike on the train. And we have some really close forest preserves, so just doing a little bit of research beforehand, making sure that you have the protective gear for your bike, and also so folks can see you, and just doing some research like you would if you're going downtown, like what are the bike lanes, doing stuff like that. I think that would be really helpful. And definitely asking a buddy to come along, or joining Facebook groups. I mean, there's so many groups out there. Like, it's really surprising how folks, the things people are passionate about and how they connect across the city. So definitely recommend doing that.
mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that. Soren, why don't you jump in? What would be your tip of where to start, where to go? You have a lot of tips in the chat, so I want you to share them.
Yeah, I was blowing up the chat with recommendations. I think for a lot of folks, like, a great entry point is major public attractions like the South Shore Cultural Center, Big Marsh Park, all of these places that are just wonderful pieces of very often our public infrastructure in the city. And then from there, just like go to a restaurant nearby, take a short walk. But at the end of the day, there's really no replacement for expanding your social horizons. Getting to know people shouldn't be transactional, though. Like, I know that there's probably a lot of white folks, especially, who don't have a very diverse friend group, who think about, well, I want to have a more diverse friend group, but how do I do that in a way that's not just like, I'm going to go find some Black people to be my friends, because that's such a problematic way to do that. But this was something that a new neighbor of mine just talked about a couple days ago down in Pullman, where a neighbor of theirs asked, well, how do you find Black friends? And it's just like, it's anybody else. You have shared interests, like go to a knitting club, go biking, like find social groups, and you'll find people who have experiences that are different from yours. And especially if you're like freeing yourselves from the physical boundaries that you've set for yourselves in the past, like your geographical boundaries, you'll find interest groups and like social groups that have experiences in these neighborhoods and can just casually give you a recommendation. And once that happens, it becomes a lot more simple.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Y'all are iconic. Adrienne, what would you say?
Oh man, so I don't really know. I mean, I still need to get better with exploring the South Side. I actually have a goal to do the action kit maybe with my grandma and go to one of the coffee shops that Soren mentioned in the chat, because I honestly don't have a great recommendation because I myself need to go spend more time on the South Side. But last summer when I was there, I did a volunteer event at, I think it was Washington Park. And I just thought that park was huge. I've never seen a park that big anywhere on the North Side. So I would definitely even just go there and walk around. I just thought it was so beautiful and the trees were huge and it was my kind of place. But as far as like a local business to frequent, I will get back to you because I will be exploring here soon.
But I stand a perfect transition into the action kit. I saw Tanika with that because that's amazing. We'll get back to that in just a second. But Joey, why don't you chime in? Where would you start?
Okay. Well, I would start with Hyde Park. You can't go wrong with Hyde Park. 55th Street, the Point is drop dead gorgeous to walk around. It's great. Great for a date. It's amazing. You go, the water and everything. You got the view of the city. The view of the city from the South Side is amazing. It's a little bit far away, but it's like you see it off in the distance there, and just amazing. You bring a sheet, bring a pillow, relax, throw it down on the grass. You know, lay down a little bit, bring sandwiches, support a Black business, get some takeout from there and bring it to the lake. That's one thing. You have architecture. You can go really, I don't know if this just pertains to CTA and getting around that way, but whoever has a car, drive around. You can drive around anywhere on like Augusta Avenue heading towards the west side, or Washington Avenue has some of the finest architectural homes you will ever see in the city. The Greystones are remarkable, but aside from that, these colorful, beautiful homes that you won't see anywhere else. It's amazing. So all that BS that you've heard about boarded up homes all over the city, no, that's not what it is. Go see the architecture.
Love that. Love that.
Jackson Park is another one. It's a beautiful park there in the South Side, just kind of near Hyde Park there. I believe it's just north of there, if I'm not mistaken. You have the conservatory as well on the west side. Go check that out. Beautiful.
That's great. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Joey. And I love that. And
one more thing. I'm sorry. Sure. I just want to say,
real quick.
Go see some live blues.
Yes.
Go see some blues. And I'm not talking about the Kingston Mines and all that. It's, you got, they're a wonderful club. Every club is wonderful. Kingston Mines, Rose's Lounge, Blues on Halsted, all that. And Southside clubs, you can go to 75th Street. What is it? I forgot.
King Drive, 75th King Drive.
Exactly. So the 50-yard line. Go to the 50-yard line on 75th Street on Tuesday nights. Go see Vance Kelly. Thank you.
You see, these are engineers, these are artists. Like I'm wondering how you all just bypass careers as tour guides. Come on now. All right, Tiana, I'm going to give you the last word. So where would you start for someone who's trying to break down these boundaries and trying to make sure that they see more of the city and break through segregation? Where would you start?
Yeah, so I know we're close to time, so I'm just going to say I would do Bronzeville. I would go to Bronzeville. I would go to Chicago Chicken and Waffles, or Ain't She Sweet is one of my favorite sandwich places. So I would definitely go there, get some coffee. They have smoothies. They have great sandwiches, and just kind of walk around. That's also another area that has beautiful architecture, beautiful gray stone buildings. And then it's pretty close to the beach as well. So you can walk over to the beach, and also close to Hyde Park.
Fabulous. Well, and all of you in the chat, you're giving so many great suggestions. And to kick it back to what Adrienne said, and we put this in the chat, the folded map kit is a really wonderful way to start and, figure out what your map twin neighborhood is, and get down to, there's a whole set of actions, and be a resident for a day. And that's a wonderful way to start. And I hope you are all writing all this down because there's so many wonderful tips in here. But yeah, I think so. It's just after 7 o'clock, so we're gonna wrap up. But I want to thank all of our amazing panelists. I mean, we could do this for another 2 hours, honestly. I mean, you guys are absolutely fabulous. We posted the links to everybody's stories in the chat, so in case you haven't had a chance to read them, you can still do that. They're all posted on Block Club Chicago's. And Tanika, Maria, thank you so much on behalf of me and Jen and Block Club. Thank you so much for working with us on this and allowing us to publish a part of your ongoing project. And we're so thrilled to be a partner with you in this and to be able to bring these stories out to a larger audience. So we're absolutely thrilled that you approached us with this, and we're, with all the ideas that are popping up about other things that we could do.
I appreciate you all, and thank you so much. Even the experience with the trolls, that's all useful, and we can all learn from those comments. And definitely for those listening, if you don't know where to start, definitely download or sign up to get the Folded Map Action Kit at Folded Map's website, and follow all of us on Instagram. Expand your algorithm, disrupt the algorithm that also helps create silos. So it was great working with you all, and I'm so happy to see you all today.
Thank you so much. And Adrienne, Soren, Tiana, Leslie, Joey, huge thank you for sharing your stories with everybody. I mean, this is not this isn't always the easiest topic to broach, and it can be very you're making yourselves very vulnerable by putting your stories and your experiences out there. But really, just for me, having read them, it was incredibly illuminating. And I think a lot of the people who are watching today, a lot of the people who are read, they found it really illuminating. And more importantly, I think they found these stories have really resonated with them and their experiences as well. So massive thank you to all of you for being open and sharing your stories. But thank you everybody on the chat. We're going to wrap up, but let us know if you have any questions, let us know if you have any feedback on Twitter and Facebook. We're around, but thank you so much for all of your participation and just absolutely amazing discussion today. And everyone be safe, be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.